Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. This video is one of those times when there is so much news to cover and we're going to jump right in. First things first, the most important and the most crucial. The Russians were, I don't want to say stopped because stopped implies permanence. I would say Russians were successfully halted in their advance to Pokrovsk. After the news came out that Karadag brigade has came in to the Pokrovsk direction from some other part of Ukraine, and additionally some additional other elements from other brigades, like from the 93rd Mechanized Brigade, came into this direction, and this has again been repeated by the Russian channels. That's why I'm comfortable talking about this. There has been now very negligible attempts by Russian to advance. But let's cover step by step. First things first, on the central part of the Russian advances, the village of Novokhodivka, Ukrainians were able to counterattack and actually were able to retake certain positions kind of towards the northern part of this village. So despite Ukrainians initially falling back for Novokhodivka, because new brigades, new forces came in, they are now in control of some parts of captured positions. Second point is Selidove. Here, actually deep state and a lot of the Ukrainian soldiers have been stating this publicly. They're stating that and deep state is the name of the map that I'm using. It's provided by the deep state. You can see it at the top of the screen written right over there. Sorry for confusing a lot of people talking about deep state. But even Ukrainian soldiers are stating that deep state, when it's coloring the gray area so close to the settlement of Selidove, it's actually being extremely generous to the Russians. The Ukrainian soldiers are stating that Russians are even further than the town borders, so like the road sign that marks the entry to the area around the settlement, that Russians haven't reached even that one. The only problematic area on this part of the front, which requires certain attention still, is this pocket right over here, the pocket around Nevilske. So the problem is there's a lot of open area with little to no settlements. Ukrainians are holding their defenses around Nevilske, this small village over here. And they have this line, Ukrainsk to Galitsinivka, which is pretty crucial to hold this pocket together. And Russians have been trying and pushing on from the north towards Galitsinivka, and it is a difficult situation. So my expectations that despite everything, that Ukrainians will fall back from this pocket at some point, just because there is no other kind of settlements in this area for Ukrainians to hold. I would not be surprised that at some point Ukrainians would set up defense along this chain. If you will see here on the map, you see that there is some heights over here, and then you see a little bit of a stream of the river. And in this war, we have seen that geography plays a huge role. So for Ukrainians, it would make sense that at some point they will establish defensive lines against Russian in this area over here. A bit problematic situation around Vuhledar has been developed recently. Russians have intensified their attacks. So to understand this, what Ukrainian forces have been stating that around Pokrovsk, Russia, majority of ways that Russia is advancing around Pokrovsk, they are using a lot of foot soldiers that are literally just advancing on their own 2 feet. With a lot of support by the aviation. So aviation destroys the Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians are forced to spread out and desaturate their defensive lines, leaving maybe 10 people defending certain positions, maybe sometimes less than 10 people. And then Russians are sending massive waves of raw manpower to attack these positions. And because it's just too many people, they're overwhelming the Ukrainian positions that way. It doesn't mean that the armor is not being used at all there, but it means that it's playing a little bit less of a common role there. However, in the Vuhledar area, Russians here for the last couple of days have been employing big strikes of specifically big armored columns towards Vodiane and Perechistivka. They succeeded somewhat, but also a lot of these columns have been burned and stopped, but the fighting is not over. But this kind of falls into the whole destabilization of this area, this southern area, by the loss of Avdiivka. So because Avdiivka fell, Ocheretina fell, this whole segment of the front line is now destabilized because Ukrainian forces need to respond to a lot of things happening right away. Then another hot area that I want to cover today is the area of Toretsk. Toretsk has been lately a lot in the news about Russians trying to reach, and it's somewhat important fortified positions. Russians were able to gain ground here very, very fast around the start to midsummer, where they were able to capture Ukrainians in very unfavorable positions during rotation and were able to collapse certain defensive lines of Ukrainians and advance quite rapidly towards the main part of Toretsk. Since then, they have been slowed down very, very significantly, and the main point of contest right now is New York. And I want to explain because a lot of people have asked me, what's up with this on this deep state map? So this northern part of New York, yes, the village is literally called New York. So this northern part of New York is weird because while some people color it like Russians have control of it, because there have been videos of Russian presence in the area, the reality on the ground is that it's very mixed. So there could be a house, and then 2 houses down, there will be a house that is controlled by Ukrainians, and the previous house was controlled by Russians. And then 2 houses down again, we will have again some position held by Russians, then another one held by Ukrainians, and so on. So it's a mix mash of like it's the definition of the gray area of the front line. But because there is a lot of Russian pushes in the area still, that area is still somewhat colored of this weird gray area inside of the red circle. So, but know that right now Toretsk is still not under threat completely. The reports are that it's pretty okay, that despite a lot of the positions trying to be, well, it says groped, but the positions are trying to be poked by the Russians, the Ukrainians are able to destroy the attacking Russian equipment. And so far, the positions around Toretsk are holding, and there is no sign that a potential collapse is incoming. So that's a strong positions for Ukrainians to hold. And then to underscore what's happening overall, General Syrskyi actually did an interview with CNN, and I highlighted a couple of things here that he said that I truly believe it's important to underscore. He praised the Kursk offensive and said that the Kursk offensive was a big success, that we reduced the threat from the enemy offensive, we prevented them from acting, we moved the fighting to the enemy's territory so that we could it could feel what we feel every day. Syrskyi said, he also mentioned that overall, Kursk was a big success because now it is harder for Russians to send reinforcements to other smaller types on the front line. So, for example, while at Pokrovsk direction, they're still able to push and make forward movements, at least major attempts at forward movement, because the reinforcements from other parts of the front line has been pulled, it eased up situation on some other parts of the front line and allowed Ukrainians to be able to maneuver just a little bit better. And he says that over the last 6 days, enemy hasn't advanced a single meter in the Pokrovsk direction. Here it's poorly translated, because obviously you can look at the map and you can say that's like, well, yeah, duh. I mean, they're still advancing in the Pokrovsk area, but I think what he meant is like towards Pokrovsk. So indeed, since Russians captured Novogrodivka, their advances directly towards the city of Pokrovsk have not been successful. So they weren't able to get closer in the last week. And he said that we've taken their ability to maneuver and to deploy the reinforcement from other direction, and this weakening has definitely been felt in other areas. We know the amount of artillery shelling as well as the intensity of offensive has decreased, and that is true. He states that the enemy does have an advantage in aviation, in missiles, in artillery, in the amount of ammunition they use, of course, in personnel, tanks, infantry, fighting vehicles, and so on. And that is crucial. Very often when we're talking about this war, a lot of the red herring and Russian shills and whatever they're stating is like, ha ha ha, it's been so much time, but Ukraine still hasn't won, therefore Russia is winning. But it's faulty because they're building a narrative like it's two comparable armies that are fighting together. That is not the case. I'll remind you that Russia still has overwhelming advantage in pretty much every area. They have advantage in infantry fighting vehicles, they have advantage in the air, they have advantage in anti-air, they have advantage in ballistic missiles, they have advantage in manpower, they have advantage everywhere. What Ukraine is able to achieve while being the underdog is amazing. And we must always, 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 always remember that Ukrainian army is much smaller than what Russia right now is fielding. Ukraine is not fighting Russia. Ukraine has defeated the Russian military and Russian army at the start of this war, during the first year. What Ukraine is fighting right now is over 50 years of the Soviet Union, the second world superpower, working their people to no end in multiple shifts to produce enormous amounts of tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, missiles, and other ammunition to fight the rest of the world. And now all of those stocks are being depleted with incredible speed and are being sent to destroy Ukraine and Ukrainians. And the fact that Ukraine is not only resisting that, but is able to aggressively counterattack, it's very, very, very good. And Syrskyi says so much. He says we cannot fight in the same way as they do. So we must use, first of all, the most effective approach, use our forces and means with maximum use of terrain features, engineering structures, and also to use technical superiority, he said, highlighting Ukraine's advanced drone program and other homegrown drone weaponry ammunition. But Syrskyi is also admitting that his troops are heading to the battlefield after receiving less training than he would like to. And these causes issues on the front line. A lot of the soldiers on the ground are referring this, that's like, yes, poor quality of trained troops. A lot of them are running away because they are not ready for war. There is some issues, and those issues are known. It's a problem because professional army ended. Like, this is not the professional army that is fighting right now in Ukraine anymore. Right now, it's the mobilized army, and that's the way it is. And Ukraine needs to adapt to these new conditions. I'm pretty sure that Ukraine will not do what Russians did to solve this problem, aka putting the Chechen battalions behind the mobilized personnel, so the attacking mobilized personnel will not run back and therefore execute them. I think Ukrainians will try to find some kind of other way to deal with these issues, but we'll see how it will go. And most important is that in this interview, Syrskyi ended up by switching to English, thanking the support from allies, being grateful for all the help that they're doing, and saying that together we are strong, together we can win. And I want to underscore that, of course, Syrskyi here it must be grateful, right? He is obviously grateful for everything that is being sent by the allies. But I am here not as a Ukrainian, I am here as a European, and I will grill our leaders, the Western powers, for all of the errors and issues and fuck-ups that they're doing to not delivering Ukraine what needs to be delivered, to not allowing Ukraine to do what needs to be done, and to, for some example, micromanaging the way that Ukrainians must fight. That is beyond evil, and I will call it out non-stop. Because the thing that I dislike the most and despise the most, when I'm being taken for a fool. So here we see John Kirby talking about the procurement of ATACMS missiles. And his argument is, well, there is like about 90% of the, reportedly, about 90% of the Russian aircraft has been moved beyond the 300 kilometers ATACMS range in Russia. So it's only 10% of the aviation is left on these airfields inside of Russia, therefore allowing Ukraine to use ATACMS missiles would be inefficient because there is only 10% of Russian planes that are attacking Ukraine that are located there. Therefore, it would be inefficient. And I'm sorry, but can we please not treat us as idiots or imbeciles? Because this is outright insulting. Like, to be honest, like with all of the despise of this position, all of my understanding that right now it's election season and so on. That's why, for example, the position that Biden has stated in his recent interview statements, like, I allowed certain things, I didn't allow certain things. I respect that answer more, despite me not agreeing with it and stating that we should fight against this. But taking us for stupid is something that I cannot forgive. What does it even mean? That's like Russia moved 90% of aircraft. Why did it happen? Did it happen because we didn't allow Ukraine to strike those airfields while the planes were on those airfields? And what about the 10% that's left? Does it mean that these 10% that left, that they're just free to still fire on Ukraine? Stop treating us like idiots. And another thing that makes my blood boil is obviously the international organizations. Here we see the head of the International Atomic Agency coming back to the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and these are Russian officials. And you see they have a good chat, they are hugging each other, ha ha ha, so great, so nice. Oh, they're only terrorists capturing and controlling and trying to extort the world with the nuclear power plant. Oh, such a good guys. And the story continues. Recently, we've seen that a lot of the missiles that rain down on the Ukrainian cities, and I'm not covering this news because every time I try to cover it, I just either fall in tears or just yell at the screen senselessly. But in a lot of these missiles that are destroying right now Ukrainian civil objects, schools, hospitals, everything, have a lot of these components that are produced by the Western companies, and they're still using very, very simple schemes over 2 years in, and even still we are seeing increase in exports to the third countries like Kyrgyzstan. This is something we can mention when we write to our direct representatives in the European Parliament, in other direct representatives in our governments, and so on. We must highlight the problem that simple schemes are happening about evasion of sanctions, and there should be an enforcement mechanism. European Union still doesn't have a sanctions enforcement body, for Christ's sake. And that is disgrace. Okay, I'm going to stop this bashing right here because I'm otherwise just going to be yelling non-stop. Ukraine did some rotations of their ministers, so significant changes to the government are coming in. Right now, I don't have exact knowledge about what we should expect, but if something comes up, I will definitely make a separate update on this. We also must praise our allies, like Syrskyi does, when good things are being done, and Romanian lawmakers have approved sending additional Patriot missile systems to Ukraine, and it is good, and I am very, very happy that it's happening. Ukrainians are also boosting their anti-air systems. Here we can see video of Ukrainian FPV taking down Lancet loitering munition by Russians. Lancet being one of the major problems provider for the Ukrainian armed forces. It has taken out a lot of Ukrainian equipment. So it's here we can see from the Stelnenko community, where they donate for these sky drones, that we see the Lancet loitering munition being taken down. But then the main news, why I am absolutely certain that Ukraine will win this war, and the answer is capitalism. Capitalism is the biggest power that Ukraine has, and I am very happy to see that it is being leveraged, because big companies love money, and I think that is the big potential that we're having. We in the Western world have a lot of money, and that is our power, and we need to leverage that power. Rheinmetall is stating that they're increasing in capacity, is expanding really fast. The factory that is being built both in Ukraine and Lithuania will produce in extensive amounts of artillery ammunition. So we will definitely see, as I projected like a year ago, that within, well, now it's a year, we will see Ukraine doing better and better in their artillery department, being able to match and maybe often outperform the Russian artillery. Good news, looking forward to this, and I truly believe that this is going to be one of the most important contributions to the Ukrainian victory. And to close out today's video, I talk a lot often about the Russian propaganda that you meet, about the Russian shills, and oftentimes we don't pay enough attention about what does it mean. We often think that it's maybe Russians paying off certain politicians, or Russians maybe trying to influence through their spy network somewhere, but it is not it. It is also something as simple as Russians buying influential people, paying them a lot of money to make propaganda against democracy, make propaganda against the Western allies, and make propaganda against Ukraine. It's Russians setting up propaganda networks that are writing comments even under this video, just waiting for you to start interacting, to get the thought in your head that potentially there is some kind of major public opinion against Ukraine and against support for Ukraine. And I'm glad that this story is finally being exposed, where major far-right voices have now been caught red-handed, receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars, I believe even actually millions of dollars, directly from the Russian propaganda agency. And they were making stories about how Ukraine is bad, how democracy is bad, etc., etc. The propaganda is closer than you might think, and Russia is spending incredible amounts of money to make sure to get in your head. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoy. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I see you next time.